The National Desk, America's News Now.
I'm releasing everybody. I still got a hold on, I think, 11 four-star generals. Everybody else is completely released from me.
400 plus military nominations now set to move forward. Why Senator Tuberville abruptly changed course on his attempt to stand up to the Department of Defense.
You could feel the sound concussion. It was impressive.
Searching for answers following the explosion that rocked a suburban D.C. area neighborhood. And millions at risk of being washed away as an atmospheric river pours over the Northwest. Just how bad and how long it will last. Right now, the holds on more than 400 military nominations and promotions have been dropped. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville had placed procedural holds on every single military nomination and promotion that needed Senate approval. He was protesting a DoD protocol to give travel reimbursements for service members and dependents who needed to cross state lines for abortions or non-covered reproductive health care. Tuberville wanted the statute voted on by Congress, but no vote was scheduled, and now he lost the leverage he was seeking.
You know, when they change the rules, it's hard to win, and so they changed the NDAA rules. We didn't get to fight for it to leave it in the Senate, and so just unfortunate the American people didn't get a voice.
Now, opponents to Tuberville's actions, including members of his own party, said these holds were a national security risk. There are still some holds left. However, promotions for several generals are still being held by the senator. It is unclear if or when those nominations will be processed. Meantime, a call from FBI Director Christopher Wray, who testified regarding the imminent need for Congress to reauthorize FISA, the warrantless international surveillance operation that is set to expire at the end of the year. Without it in place, Wray said it would be devastating to the nation's counter cyber and terrorism threats. Meanwhile, Director Wray also saying the FBI is working hard around the clock to identify and disrupt domestic attacks that could be inspired by Hamas or its sympathizers, and that he sees, quote, all of the threats elevated at the same time.
Blinking red lights analogy about 9/11. All the lights were blinking red before 9/11. Apparently, obviously, all of us missed it. Would you say that there's multiple blinking red lights out there?
I see blinking lights everywhere I turn.
Elsewhere on Capitol Hill, 3 university presidents testifying before the U.S. House Educational Committee after reports of surging anti-Semitism on their campuses.
So I want to ask each one of you, President Gay, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish nation?
I agree that the state of Israel has the right to exist.
Ms. McGill, same question.
I agree, Chairwoman Fox, the state of Israel has the right to exist.
Dr. Kornbluth.
Absolutely. Israel has the right to exist.
Well, the committee is calling on presidents from Harvard, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania to look into incidents of anti-Semitism. Chairwoman Virginia Fox says those schools have a big role in shaping the future for all of academia. Since the October 7th attack, the Education Department has opened an unprecedented amount of alleged hate crime incidents on campus. Meantime, all eyes on a powerful atmospheric river storm drenching the Pacific Northwest. At least one person we know of at this moment has died after being swept away by a flooded creek, and more than 10 million people are under flood alerts. Over 8 inches of rain have already fallen in the last 24 hours. Runoff from melting snow posing a huge risk for mudslides and avalanches. The storm is expected to die down by Friday. And 2 months into the ongoing war in the Middle East, with thousands of casualties, the U.S. has announced plans to establish a field hospital inside Gaza to help civilians who have been wounded. This all part of a $21 million aid package for civilians there, announced today alongside a delivery made with 36,000 pounds of food and medical supplies for the Palestinian territory. At the moment, not clear when that hospital will be up and running, but the need, according to humanitarian organizations on the ground, paramount as Israeli forces continue their offensive, pushing now deeper south. Video here of the destruction following multiple strikes in south central Gaza. At this hour, the IDF now in the heart of the southern portion of Gaza in Khan Yunis, Gaza's second largest city right here, and what Israeli forces have called their most intense military offensive yet. Forces continuing their calls at this hour for evacuations in the southern portion of the enclave as criticism now mounts from the UN and other aid groups that the 2 million plus Gazans, many of which who fled to the south from the north in the war-torn north from the fighting there, that they are now squeezed with nowhere to go.
I think of it as kind of like a piece of paper, right? You fold it in half, so you move south, fold it in half again, fold it in half again. At some point, there is no place for them to go. There is no safe place, and they know that, and they feel that, and they're terrified.
And are we at that point now?
I think we're close to that.
And it comes as tensions at Israel's northern border grow more severe. You're looking now at video that was obtained by CNN of rockets launched from southern Lebanon into Israel. This as Lebanon says a Lebanese soldier has been killed by Israeli shelling, the first such death since cross-border hostilities began in October. As for the number of hostages now believed to be held in Gaza, that number now at 138. No clear indication that additional truce talks are moving in the right direction. But it comes as the Israeli Ministry of Health says it believes that more than 100 hostages who were released were drugged before being turned over with a drug called clonazepam, which is believed to be used to make them look happier and more relaxed after their time in captivity. Also tonight, the Department of Justice has until Friday to respond to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals after the court ruled federal agents may no longer cut existing razor wire on the Texas-Mexico border. The appellate court granted a stay until they review the case further, overruling a district court who had ruled in favor of the Biden administration just last week. Texas has placed more than 70,000 rolls of wiring along the Rio Grande border with Mexico. And at least some of the potential jurors in former President Donald Trump's federal election interference trial now know they are in the selection pool. The U.S. District Court for D.C. has started mailing pre-screening forms asking people about their availability. The forms don't name the defendant, but the dates listed line up with Trump's trial. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan denied 2 of Trump's motions to dismiss the case on Friday. A Texas prosecutor says his office is dismissing indictments against 17 Austin police officers for their actions during the 2020 racial injustice protests and asking the DOJ to take over. He still plans to prosecute 4 officers. The city of Austin has paid out more than $18 million in settlement money for injuries during the protests. The Austin Police Association president says no wrongdoing by officers has been proven. And the Supreme Court is considering a case that could impact how the wealthy get taxed. It involves a couple who paid $15,000 in taxes based on an investment in an Indian company. The government says this tax on unrealized foreign income should stand. The couple wants a refund, arguing it violates the Constitution, and the husband never got money from the company. Today, the court seemed inclined to uphold the tax. The Supreme Court decided today that a case concerning Americans as well with the Disabilities Act, that it is moot. It noted that the plaintiff, Deborah Lawfer, dropped her case. Lawfer is a so-called ADA tester who sued a hotel for alleged noncompliance based on the information on its website. The unresolved question is whether a non-hotel guest can file this type of lawsuit. It has been just about 7 months since the COVID-19 pandemic was declared officially over, and yet state and local governments, which received aid money to help with recovery efforts, will now get even more time to use it. As national correspondent Christine Frizzell reports, some critics believe they should instead give the money back.
During those long months of quarantine from COVID-19, it wasn't just businesses that lost millions of dollars. The lack of tax revenue meant state and local governments did too. Part of the coronavirus relief fund was meant to fix that. State and local fiscal recovery funds would end up totaling $350 billion.
We feel as if this addresses the needs for states that have lost a lot.
But years later, more than half of it remains unspent. The U.S. Treasury Department now saying what the money can be used for has a little more wiggle room. The Department of Treasury's updated rule amends the definition of obligation to provide additional flexibility to recipients of COVID relief funds. They'll no longer have to pay back unobligated money as long as estimates of the amounts they plan to use are given. Critics call it a, quote, Bidenomics slush fund. The conservative Economic Policy Innovation Center detailing how millions of dollars were approved for projects to update swimming pools, golf courses, and sports stadiums at a time when our national debt has reached well over $33 trillion.
While the American people struggled during the pandemic, our tax dollars are being used for all kinds of frivolous purposes, and I think it's upsetting.
As of March of this year, the Government Accountability Office reported states and localities had not even spent 50% of their awards.
COVID aid was meant to help people or institutions or entities that had real needs. To the extent that you don't have a financial need, you should pay the money back.
Lawmakers have in fact agreed to claw back about $30 million in coronavirus relief money, with Republicans still pushing to get much more returned. Amira?
Christine, thank you. And coming up, some lawmakers are asking why Senator Bob Menendez is still allowed to serve. We're going to look at new evidence in his federal corruption case. Then the new information we're learning about this house explosion right here in a D.C. suburb that happened last night and the suspect believed to be inside. Plus, we look into new research shedding light on the possible health risks of using marijuana. We are back in 90 seconds. Two alleged IRS whistleblowers testifying behind closed doors before the House Ways and Means Committee today. Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler claiming politics influenced the IRS's investigation into President Biden's son, Hunter. They have previously said decisions were made throughout the probe to benefit Hunter, arguing he should have been charged with a tax felony. The testimony comes as House committees look to gather evidence right now for an impeachment inquiry against President Biden.
Our investigation continues to produce evidence revealing President Biden's corruption and litany of lies.
Republicans are also probing the Biden family's foreign business dealings. President Biden has denied any wrongdoing, and House Democrats say this is further proof that GOP is run by extremists.
Some, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, are even taking credit for getting Speaker Johnson to flip-flop on impeachment. Because of her, we will spend more floor time on baseless accusations and political gamesmanship.
Meantime, there is a new twist in the federal corruption case against New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez. A new report appearing to strengthen the prosecution's case that he accepted bribes for his political influence. National correspondent Atra Al-Nashar with more.
More than 2 months after being indicted on federal corruption charges, there's renewed pressure on Democratic Senator Bob Menendez to step down.
What you see here are 3 kilograms of gold.
The public's learning more about how prosecutors may back up their allegation Menendez took bribes from New Jersey businessman Fred Davies to influence the New Jersey U.S. Attorney's Office in 2018. When it investigated Davies for bank fraud.
We have exclusive new information about those gold bars.
WNBC in New York City linking gold bars found in Menendez's home to Davies. How? The serial numbers on them match those of gold bars that were stolen from Davies during a 2013 robbery at his penthouse and were later returned to him. A lawyer for Menendez called it anonymous media leaks designed to prejudice his right to a fair trial. On Capitol Hill, half of Menendez's fellow Democratic senators have called on him to step down.
I will continue to cast votes on behalf of the people of New Jersey.
Menendez said that in late September, and there's no sign he's changing his mind. His office did not respond to our request for comment. His colleague, Democratic Senator John Fetterman, found a new way to get his attention.
Hey, Bobby, look, I don't think I need to tell you, but these people that want to make you get in trouble, you make them put up or shut up.
With this cameo by George Santos, Fetterman draws a parallel between Menendez and the now expelled congressman.
If you expel somebody like, George Santos, how can you allow somebody like, Senator Menendez remain in the Senate as well, too?
Congresswoman Susan Wild, the top Democrat on the House Ethics Committee that released the report preceding Santos's expulsion, says if a Senate ethics investigation into Menendez is happening, it would be confidential.
But I hope that they, follow the same kind of rigorous process that we followed here.
A process that may or may not have the same outcome for Menendez as it did for Santos. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra Al-Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Atra, thank you. A new closely watched report shows job numbers dropped in October to their lowest point in 2.5 years to around 8.7 million, a 6.6% decline. The Fed has been increasing interest rates to slow the labor market and inflation. One economist says this data solidifies the Fed's decision to keep rates the same. The Fed's policy meeting happens next week. Investigators continue working to find out what caused a home to explode last night in Arlington, Virginia. Police were trying to execute a search warrant, responding to reports that a man was shooting a flare gun from the home. They heard what sounded like gunshots, and shortly after, the explosion rocked the neighborhood. Some officers did suffer minor injuries. The suspect, 56-year-old James Yu, is believed to be dead. Police providing an update today.
We are aware of concerning social media posts allegedly made by the suspect, and these will be reviewed as part of the ongoing criminal investigation.
And police do not have evidence that others were in the home at the time. Another congressman has announced he is not seeking re-election next year. This time it is Republican Patrick McHenry of North Carolina, who briefly served as Speaker after Kevin McCarthy was ousted. McHenry, who is the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, will finish his term without stepping down. At least 21 incumbents in the House and Senate will not be running again for office in 2024. Meanwhile, fewer young voters could be voting in next year's elections. That's according to a new Harvard poll, which shows just 49% of 18 to 29-year-olds definitely plan on voting in 2024, down from 57% who said the same in late 2019. We see a big decline among younger minorities as well. Black and Hispanic Americans both have a double-digit decline in their likelihood to participate next year when compared to 4 years ago. Well, we have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Washington, where Governor Jay Inslee shared a plan to reduce the number of deaths from fentanyl overdoses.
We simply are seeing a drug
epidemic that like nothing we've ever seen.
Treatment providers like Linda Grant with Evergreen Recovery Centers in Everett voiced her concerns to Governor Jay Inslee about the issues they're facing to combat the fentanyl crisis.
At some point, we have to move downstream and really help the people before they become users of fentanyl. That once they start using, it's very hard to reverse it.
During the upcoming legislative session, Governor Inslee's budget adds over $50 million in new funding for the 2023 to 2025 biennium. His budget would allocate money to education and awareness, overdose prevention, treatment access, recovery support, first responder support, and community health hubs.
And we find community health hubs that provide multiple solutions for people can really be helpful.
Well, a study from the Department of Agriculture found that more than 15% of Texas households lack consistent access to food that is both healthy and affordable, meaning they fit the description of being food insecure. A food pantry in Abilene says the amount of people in need in that area has significantly increased.
We service anywhere from 3 to about 500 each month. And it's been an increase since May when the pandemic benefits ceased. Normally we would see maybe 6 to 7 per time that we're open, and we are consistently seeing 15 to 20 families each time we're open.
The pantry has found ways to offset rising food prices, including a community garden and their no waste program where restaurants donate leftovers. A shocking moment caught on camera, a car suddenly slamming into the Swish Swish Hot Pot restaurant in Washington as people were enjoying their meals. The car crashed into at least 2 booths, but narrowly missed hitting anyone. The restaurant says no one was seriously hurt.
The girl right next to the car only had scratches on her legs. I really think this is a miracle. And I think, as I said, a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, it will be very different outcome.
Well, police are now investigating that crash. Coming up, what new evidence shows about potential health problems linked to marijuana as more states now move to legalize the drug. As more states move to legalize marijuana, a new study shows it may come with some significant health risks. Medical reporter Liz Bonas shares what's been linked to cannabis use disorder.
Hey there, everybody. This study published in Nature Genetics now adding to a growing body of evidence, pulmonologists say, linking cannabis use disorder to lung cancer risk.
It turns out it may have to do with what's in your genes. Researchers have identified stretches of DNA that could be linked to cannabis addiction and associated with health conditions such as lung cancer. What we don't know is if certain ways marijuana is delivered into the body, such as smoking weed, may influence this risk.
My general rule of thumb
is anything inhaled except medications can certainly be harmful to your lungs.
Pulmonologist Dr. Vogel says we don't know all the early warning signs yet that pot may be influencing your lungs. He suggests you see a healthcare provider for evaluation if you notice
Shortness of breath, coughing, including a chronic cough that's prolonged, wheezing, chest tightness. Those are some of the symptoms that can develop with any of use of these drugs.
The CDC reports marijuana is now used by nearly 1 in 5 people at least once a year. Of those users, roughly a third of people develop marijuana addiction or cannabis use disorder, which is defined as a problematic pattern of cannabis use, which leads to significant impairment or distress. So given that we're seeing this association with certain genetics and cannabis use disorder and lung cancer risk, what's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is, especially as a public health advocate and any of my specific patients who I'm treating, especially with chronic lung disease, that unfortunately the data is starting to trend that way. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that the data is going to continue to show damaging health effects, damaging health consequences, specifically to the lungs, as well as the heart and overall health in general.
Next step, he says, maybe to consider asking about cannabis use at regular checkups at your doctor's office to assess the need for early or yearly lung cancer screening. With your health news, I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus reporting.
And coming up here, the impact of a 23andMe hack. It is a whole lot bigger than previously thought. What customers need to know. The genetic testing company 23andMe says hackers have gained access to nearly 7 million user profiles. 23andMe says the criminals breached around 14,000 accounts, but obtained access to millions more using the DNA relatives feature. The firm says it's notifying impacted customers and is working to further protect user data. Keep changing those passwords. Stay vigilant out there. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage of America's top stories. Just check your local listings for times. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.